My name is Rachel McIntyre. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and I hadn't been to a family gathering in almost 7 years. Not because I couldn't, but because no one really noticed when I wasn't there. Then one day, out of nowhere, an envelope showed up in my base mailbox. Cream cardstock, gold trim, and my full name handwritten in a cursive I recognized from old birthday cards. It was an invitation to my grandmother's 70th birthday, complete with RSVP instructions and a note that said formal attire preferred. I stood in my office holding it for a long time, not because I was moved, but because I couldn't figure out what had changed. No one had called. No one had even asked if I'd be in the country. I hadn't heard from my cousin Alyssa since she tagged me in a meme about boss babes 3 Christmases ago. So why now? The truth came faster than I expected. A family friend had found out I'd made lieutenant colonel, and apparently it had become a talking point. Suddenly, I wasn't the ghost who never called. I was the military relative they could casually mention to neighbors and church friends. Someone to prove our family had depth. I don't know what stung more, the years of silence or the sudden need to display me like a medal in a shadow box. Still, I checked yes on the RSVP. I wasn't going because I missed them. I was going because something in me had stopped hoping they'd ever ask about my life for the right reasons. I wasn't angry, just tired. And maybe, in a quiet way, I wanted to show up. Not to brag, not to confront, but to be seen. Just once. On my terms. I booked a flight for the Friday before the dinner. Told my CO I'd be back Sunday night. I didn't bring much. One navy dress, low heels, and a clutch I could fold my orders into if needed. I wasn't expecting hugs. I wasn't expecting apologies. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much of anything at all. When I was a kid, family dinners meant two things: too much butter on everything, and Alyssa at the center of it all. My cousin had this glow about her. Not just the literal kind from whatever shimmery lotion she wore, but the kind of attention that settled around her like stage lights. She played the violin, won science fairs. She was homecoming queen before she even hit high school. Everyone loved telling the Alyssa story. I was usually the one setting the table or clearing plates while they did. I don't remember anyone ever asking me how school was. If they did, it was in the same tone you use when you ask a cashier how their day's going and expect nothing but a nod. I'd mumble something about reading or math club, and they'd already be halfway through pouring another drink. The year I made regionals in track, I brought home a bronze medal. I was 13, proud in that shaky way kids are when they're hoping it matters to someone else. I showed it to my aunt, Alyssa's mom. She said that's cute and went back to icing cupcakes for Alyssa's birthday party. No one else brought it up again. Eventually, I stopped bringing things. I learned how to stay quiet, how to shrink myself just enough that my silence didn't bother anyone. It was easier that way. If no one asked, then I didn't have to feel the sting of not being heard. At one Thanksgiving, Alyssa got a certificate for a leadership camp. There was a whole toast: champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for the rest of us. I remember clapping and watching her flash that practice smile, the kind that looked great in photos. My dad patted her on the back. My mom said, "Now that's a girl going places." I sat next to the mashed potatoes and chewed my turkey slowly. I don't think it was ever malicious. That's the part that made it worse. It wasn't cruelty. It was an absence. The kind of neglect you can't point to, but you feel it anyway. Like walking into a room and knowing the light's always been pointed somewhere else. By the time I graduated from high school early, no one in the family really noticed. Alyssa was getting engaged. There was a backyard party with lanterns and matching napkins. I sent a card. I didn't go. I think that's when I started becoming the ghost. It wasn't dramatic. No slam doors or family fights. I just stopped showing up. And the strange part? No one called to ask why. Over the years, the tables stayed full. Alyssa had kids. There were barbecues, photo albums, hashtags. I'd see them occasionally on social media, my name sometimes tagged by mistake. But I'd already taught myself a long time ago. If no one asks you to speak, you learn to listen. And if no one notices you're missing, maybe you weren't really there in the first place. I joined the Air Force 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. While everyone else was picking dorm furniture and talking about college majors, I was standing on hot pavement in Texas, shouting "Yes, sir" until my voice cracked. It wasn't a rebellion, it was clarity. Flying had always been in the margins of my notebooks. I drew wings before I ever put on eyeliner. The first time I sat in a cockpit, I didn't smile. I listened. I absorbed every switch, every sequence, like my bones already knew the rhythm of it. Basic was hard. Officer training was harder. But flight school broke something and rebuilt it tighter. They pushed you to know yourself down to the second. Seconds mattered when you were rolling out of a stall or rerouting power during engine failure. Everything could fall apart in the time it takes someone to blink. There were days I wanted to quit. Nights, I stared at the ceiling of my bunk, wondering if anyone back home even remembered what I was doing. Letters came slowly, if at all. When I finally earned my pilot's wings, I stood alone in a ceremony, watched by strangers. I still remember the first time someone saluted me. I almost didn't return it, thought it was a mistake. But it wasn't. I had earned it. That salute meant something. It meant I was accountable for more than just myself now. After a few deployments, I got recruited for a NATO training program designed for elite female pilots. The kind of assignment you can't talk about. Our base was buried in desert silence, sun like a spotlight that never blinked. We trained in high-altitude maneuvers, mid-air refueling, and electronic countermeasures. The pace was brutal. The standard was unforgiving. I didn't mind. We weren't in it for medals. We were building instincts that would save lives. You learn to read turbulence the way other people read faces. You learn to trust your gut when the instruments told you everything was fine, but your skin said otherwise. Some of the other women had kids, husbands, people who sent care packages. I got occasional emails from old college friends, once a group photo from a cousin's baby shower I hadn't known about. The last time I sent a picture home was after my promotion. I, standing beside a fighter jet, shaking hands with a general. My mom replied with one line, "Looks intense. Be safe." The photo disappeared somewhere into the digital void. No one asked what the badge meant. No one asked about the flight hours or the responsibility that came with the rank. After that, I stopped sending updates. I told myself it was better this way. Less explaining. Less disappointment. If they wanted to know, they would have asked. But they didn't. Not really. And still, I showed up every day. Pre-flight checks at 0400. Tactical briefs that could change in a heartbeat. Missions that required silence, precision, and faith in your team more than in luck. I carried all of it, quietly. Not because I needed recognition, but because this was where I felt most alive, most real. Serving where no one was watching taught me something. You don't need a spotlight to stand tall. You just need to know, without question, that you've earned your place in the sky. The email came 2 days before the flight. The subject line was blunt. Directive. Secure delivery of protocol revision. Lieutenant Reyes assigned. ETA 1,000. 900 hours. My eyes flicked down the message. The packet was being sent under direct orders from General Pierce. Personal handoff. No exceptions. I stared at the screen for a full minute, just breathing. Dinner with my family was scheduled for 6:30. Some overpriced private room in a restaurant that served more types of wine than actual food. I had planned to arrive at 6:29, sit through the courses, and disappear before dessert. Now there was a new variable. I could have asked them to reschedule, could have told command to send it to base, delay the handoff, or reroute the courier. But I didn't. I just closed the laptop and let the clock keep ticking. It wasn't about theatrics. I didn't need anyone to know what I did. I had spent years burying that urge. But a part of me didn't mind the idea of being interrupted, of someone else walking into a room where I was usually invisible and addressing me like I mattered. Not as a daughter, not as a cousin, not as a family obligation, but as the officer I'd earned the right to be. Still, I didn't plan anything. I packed the same dress. Navy, understated. No pins or badges. Just me, civilian. I left my name tag in the hotel safe. The only thing that hinted at anything military was the watch on my wrist, the kind you wear when you're used to measuring time in briefings and burn rates. That Friday, I spent most of the day reviewing flight sim footage for our next training cycle. My inbox stayed quiet until 3 p.m., when Reyes checked in via secure line. His message was brief. Confirmed delivery, uniformed handoff, no need for escort. He asked where I'd like the exchange to take place. I told him about the restaurant lobby. There was a long pause before he replied. Understood, ma'am. I closed the message window and stood for a moment. The silence of the room was different now, heavy in a way I couldn't name. I didn't tell anyone at dinner what was coming. I didn't warn the hostess or ask for privacy. I just showed up on time, took my seat, and waited. Not for validation, not even for drama. I just waited, like you do in the final seconds before takeoff, when everything is still, but you can feel the thrust already building beneath you. They didn't know it, but something was already on its way. Something precise, quiet, unshakable. The kind of moment that doesn't need permission to land. The dining room looked like a catalog. Too many candles, too little light, and more forks than anyone knew what to do with. Alyssa was already holding court, seated right in the middle like she'd been assigned the role by central casting. She wore white, of course. Flowing sleeves, gold hoops, the kind of outfit that whispered effortlessly chic. Her husband stood behind her chair for a moment too long before sitting down, like waiting for applause. By the time I arrived, appetizers were halfway gone. A few cousins looked up, surprised, like I was a pop quiz they hadn't studied for. My uncle gave me a nod. My dad said something about traffic. My mom smiled like I was a polite stranger she'd met once on a cruise. I sat at the end of the table, not far enough to be dismissed, but far enough to be ignored without guilt. Alyssa was already deep into a story about her latest reality TV client. Something about staging a house for a B-list celebrity and having to remove all signs of personality. Everyone laughed when she imitated the agent's fake British accent. I sipped my water and reached for a roll. Someone asked me if I was still flying. I said yes, just training now. The conversation shifted before I could finish the sentence. Alyssa leaned over her plate, glass in hand, and grinned. Said something about how not everyone gets to live off-grid with government clearance. Then she laughed. But no one joined in right away. Just clinks of silverware and awkward glances. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than explaining what I really wanted to say. She kept going. Talked about the latest Pilates studio near her house. The struggle of finding a good nanny. How hard it was juggling work with being a present mom. She said it like she was confessing to hardship, like she was being brave. The kicker came after dessert orders were taken. Someone joked about moving out of state, and Alyssa, without missing a beat, looked straight at me and said, "Maybe some people prefer to fly off and leave others to handle the real responsibilities." She didn't even flinch. The table chuckled. My mom gave a tight smile. My aunt raised her eyebrows like it was clever. I took a breath, let it sit in my chest for a second, then let it go. I wasn't here to trade punches. I was here to finish a meal and walk away with my spine intact. Still, that moment settled into the air like a heavy perfume. Everyone could smell it. No one said a thing. I folded my napkin, reached for my water, counted the minutes. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's discipline. And in that room, surrounded by people who never really saw me, holding my tongue felt like the only power. It happened just after the cake was served. Alyssa was still talking, this time about some influencer who rented a property she listed. Something about how exhausting it was to stage a closet for people who didn't fold their own towels. I was halfway through a bite of cake when a waiter in a black vest leaned toward the table. He cleared his throat gently and said, "Miss McIntyre, there's someone in the lobby requesting you step out. Delivery protocol." The table quieted. Alyssa tilted her head and smirked. Delivery? What? Did Amazon follow you here? A few people chuckled. My father reached for his wine again. I placed my fork down and stood slowly. Just documents. I'll be right back. My heels clicked across the marble. Not loud, but steady. With each step, the hum of conversation behind me faded, like a dimmed radio. When I turned the corner toward the lobby, I saw him. Lieutenant Reyes stood tall in full dress uniform, flight suit pressed sharply, boots polished to a mirror shine. As soon as he saw me, he snapped to attention. His voice rang out clearly. Lieutenant Colonel McIntyre, ma'am. Delivery secured. General Pierce sends his compliments. And then he saluted. Sharp, controlled, full extension. For a second, I just stood there. Not from shock, from certainty. Then I returned the salute. Just as crisp, just as still. I took the folder from his hands. Thank you, Lieutenant. You are dismissed. Yes, ma'am. He held his posture until I turned, and only then did he lower his hand and step back, remaining by the entrance like a sentry waiting for further orders. When I walked past the dining room again, I didn't rush. I wanted them to see, not to gloat, just to let the silence settle. Back at the table, my seat was exactly how I left it. Fork resting against the plate, frosting melting in slow folds. I slid the envelope into my purse, sat down, and picked up where I left off. Sorry for the interruption. Please go on. But no one spoke. The air was different now. Thick in a way even the gold leaf cake couldn't distract from. Alyssa's smile had vanished. My mother stared at the folder like it might start glowing. My dad cleared his throat and glanced away. A cousin blinked at me, wide-eyed. Another just adjusted his glass and said nothing. The silence stretched. Then, soft and brittle, Alyssa asked if salutes like that were even real. Sounded like a joke. Felt like a question she didn't want answered. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The only people who stumble after a salute are the ones who didn't expect it. Or the ones who suddenly realize they should have. I took another bite of cake. It was too sweet. Too expensive. Still, I chewed slowly. Let the moment hold. No speeches. No declarations. Just the quiet shift of a room, realizing it had misread the story all along. And I let them sit with that. Alyssa was the first to speak, though her voice had lost its usual shine. She leaned forward slightly, napkin clutched in her hand, like she needed something to anchor her. Are you really a lieutenant colonel? I looked at her, then at the others. My grandmother's eyes were wide, her mouth slightly parted like she'd missed the whole buildup and was only just realizing she'd been in the front row. My mother shifted in her chair. My father swirled the last of his wine. Yes, I've been in service for 16 years. 16 years. The number dropped into the middle of the table and didn't bounce. Alyssa blinked like she was trying to do the math. Someone at the far end of the table cleared their throat, then quickly looked down. But how come no one ever told us? My mother's voice was soft, like stepping barefoot into a room after a storm. We could have sent something, said something, celebrated. I tilted my head slightly, like the time I finished flight school, and you sent a Facebook message that said, "Stay safe," then asked if I could Venmo Alyssa for a stroller she liked. The words weren't sharp, just simple, like stating the color of a wall. She opened her mouth, closed it. My grandmother looked at her plate. A cousin picked at a crumble of cake like it might hold answers. Alyssa leaned back. I just didn't know. But her voice was small. Not guilty. Just caught. You never asked. It landed harder than I thought it would. Maybe because it wasn't angry. It was just true. Years of small talk. Years of how's work. Said with the same tone you ask about the weather. Not once had anyone leaned in like they really wanted to know. Now they were staring like I was someone new. But I wasn't. I had always been this. I didn't rub it in. Didn't say more than needed. I just picked up my water, took a sip, and set it down with care. No clatter. No punctuation. The room was silent. Not uncomfortable, just still. Some truths are louder without volume. Some shifts don't need speeches, just presence. I let the silence stretch, and for once, no one tried to fill it. I stood slowly, gathering my purse, sliding the folder into place. No one tried to stop me. My mother looked like she might say something, but the words never came. Alyssa kept her eyes on her plate. My father reached for the bottle again, forgetting it was empty. I straightened my shoulders and gave a small, polite nod toward the table. Thank you for the dinner. And that was it. The room didn't explode. No one made a scene. The quiet that followed me out was louder than any applause could have been. Lieutenant Reyes was still by the entrance, exactly where I'd left him. Posture perfect, gaze steady. I didn't say a word, just gave him a subtle nod, and he opened the door without hesitation. I stepped out. The hallway was cooler than I remembered. Bright in a way the dining room never was. The door clicked softly behind me, not with drama, just finality. Outside, the night was clear. The air tasted sharp, clean, like I'd walked through something and come out on the other side. I didn't look back. There was nothing I'd left behind. Reyes disappeared into his vehicle without another salute, just a nod. Mutual respect. No need for ceremony when the truth has already been spoken. I reached my rental, turned the key, and drove. Not in a rush, just steady. Each street lamp casting a circle of light. I moved through without hesitation. By morning, I was back on base. The sun wasn't up yet, but the tarmac glowed under floodlights. Wind tugged at my sleeves as I stepped out. Clipboard in hand, eyes clear. A new cycle of cadets stood waiting. Their stances are a little too stiff, expressions caught between nerves and expectation. They straightened when they saw me. Not because of the uniform, not because of the salute from the night before, but because I carried something they recognized. Discipline, certainty, command earned, not demanded. They didn't need to understand my past. They only needed to trust me with their future.